Hello, everyone. I wanted to start by giving you a warm welcome to this webinar on thriving as an LGBTQIA+ person of colour in the workplace. So this is brought to you by our employability and upskilling scheme. So my name is May Kay. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the project officer at Blossom LGBT, who has this employability and upskilling scheme. So in this webinar, we're going to be focusing on the fact that being a part of the LGBTQIA+ community presents unique challenges in the workplace. But for people of colour, those challenges often intersect with additional layers of marginalisation and systemic barriers. So that's why this webinar is designed to walk you through these experiences, provide guidance to protect your mental health, embrace your authenticity, and confidently lead you through your career journey. So Asha, who will introduce herself in a minute, is not just the host of our webinar today, but is also an equity strategist, a public speaker, trainer, and founder of Indigo Inclusion. With her profound work as an anti-racist, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, she brings a wealth of experience and empathy for our gathering tonight. So let's embark on this journey together as we discover how we can truly thrive as LGBTQIA+ people of colour in the workplace. So Asha, I will leave it to you.
Thank you very much, May Kay. Okie dokes. So I'm just going to present my slides. Hopefully the right ones. Can you see my slides? There we go. Yes, okay, we can see them now. Amazing. And let me just double check they're the right ones. Yes, amazing. Okay, so here we are. We're at the intersection. As May Kay mentioned, we are global majority people or melanated people who also happen to be part of the LGBTQIA+ community. And we're wondering, how on earth can we thrive at work, especially when there's a lot of systems and barriers, visible and invisible, that make it quite tricky for us. So as we go along today, if you have any questions, I'm going to have this QR code at the end of the presentation, but you can also go on your phone. If you just type in menti.com, you can go to the link. So it's menti.com, and you'll be asked to enter a code to access the questionnaire, which is just where you can enter any questions you have. And that code is 18977099. And again, this will be at the end of the presentation, and I'll be fielding your questions then. So if anything comes up along the way, please do enter your questions there. I would love to hear from you. So just to describe myself, my name is Asha Harkness. My pronouns are she, her. I am a brown woman, and today I have got my black hair up in a bun above my head. I've got some jangly, sparkly gold earrings on. I'm wearing a green turtleneck, and over the top of that, I've got a sheer black blouse with rainbow sparkly bits on. So that's me. And thank you, May Kay, for that lovely introduction. This is a little bit on screen here of the bio that May Kay ran through, but essentially why I wanted to share this with you in particular is because, so I've got a little descriptor here at the bottom. So I describe myself now as someone who has a mind that is like a hive full of bees, constantly foraging for new information from an abundant and diverse flora. And I make unique honey with that information, and it's made for sharing because it soothes and it strengthens. That is something that I find a very empowering way to describe myself. I also describe myself as a proud, queer, brown, neurodivergent woman. And that's not always been the case. And the emphasis on the proud part of me there. So this image here that I'm sharing, it's me in a bright orange top holding a big microphone. I've got my long black hair down, and I've got some jewelry on, and I'm looking a bit sassy off camera. And this is important. This is the image that I hold in my mind's eye about myself when I want to show up authentically as me, as that proud, intersectionally marginalized person, which can be really tricky. So, as we all know, we are facing a lot of different societal barriers, and I've got some stats just to share with you here, especially, well, it's sometimes just happy to be aware of the numbers. We kind of know and feel a lot of this and much more, but for any allies on the call as well, this is really important. So Stonewall has released a few of these stats here. So compared to just only 3% of white LGBT staff surveyed, 10% of Black, Asian and minority ethnic LGBT staff have been physically attacked, either because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, or gender identity. And compared to 4% of white LGBT staff, 12% of those have lost their job in the last year at the time of the survey. This might be something that you yourself identify with and have knowledge of and experience of, either for yourself or for a colleague. And we know mental health conditions and mental health challenges are something that affects everybody. It doesn't discriminate, but with these extra societal barriers, we know that people within the LGBTQIA plus community have a higher propensity to them, and Stonewall has again evidenced this. 50% of us experiencing depression and 60% of us experiencing anxiety. And that's no wonder when hate crimes are on the rise, and based on sexual orientation in the last 5 years up until 2023, last year, those hate crimes based on sexual orientation have increased by 112%. And we know that specifically for trans people, the hate crime is increasingly on the rise as well. And with the recent UK racist and Islamophobic attacks happening across the UK, named as race riots in the mainstream media, we have seen the report from Statista this year is that hate crime has increased for Muslims alone 13% from last year. So this is something we know and we feel inherently from our experiences, from people in our community's experiences. We know that there is a lack of safety, to say the least, in society as a whole. We know that people of colour, Black people, Black and non-Black bodied people of colour, I should say, and LGBT people, or those at the intersection of the two, are less likely to be in leadership positions in the workplaces. They're less likely to get seed funding or venture capital funding for their businesses. There's also a massive intersectionally marginalised group, of which I consider myself belonging to, of neurodivergent people. We know that the LGBTQIA plus community and the neurodivergent community overlap very heavily, and often workplaces aren't set up for neurodivergent people either. So there's a lot of racist, ableist, sexist, misogynistic, transphobic barriers, and we all know this, that we're meeting in society, and of course the people that make up society are in the workplace, so that's what we're going to meet on a day-to-day. And yeah, this in some ways this can show itself in the form of lack of actual policies that protect us, lack of trans inclusion policies, or LGBTQA plus specific bullying and harassment policies, a lack of inclusive parental leave policies even that mean that we don't have the same opportunities if we want to have IVF as a queer couple or if we want to adopt. The dress codes within workplaces can also be a barrier to us being our full authentic selves and being comfortable and just being able to get on with our work, because it can mean that actually we can't bring our cultural identity in the workplace. We certainly can't wear gender-affirming clothes if we have those limitations. So that can just be a step on its own that holds us back, that's unseen and doesn't affect other people that are not intersectionally marginalised as we are. As mentioned, there's a lack of leadership of people that hold our identities that we can see are successful in our workplaces, in our industries. And we are faced with microaggressions on the regular about either our sexuality, our skin tone or both, our accents, what food we're bringing into the office or choosing to eat, the clothing that we're wearing, our communication style or the words that we choose to use. And as touched on as well, often there's that large number of us that are also neurodivergent and unsupported within the workplace, or don't even realise that we're neurodivergent ourselves and so can't seek out that support. So this may all sound a bit depressing, but it's the reality, and it's why we need this talk today. The reason that it's really important to just sometimes acknowledge that consciously, because a lot of it's all going in, but sometimes because we face it on a daily basis and we have a lot of traumatic experiences because of our intersectionally marginalised identities, we can not really want to look there. We can just keep our heads down and plough on with our day-to-day and try to be okay or try to seem okay. But really, all of this messaging, either from the stats that we hear about or read, the leaders that we see in our organisation, the behaviours of people in our workplace or our industry, the mainstream media, who gets to have representation in adverts or in movies or in books, or who gets the podcast awards, all of that messaging is telling us things like, you're not welcome, or you're not normal, you're not right, you're not enough, you are other, or you're too much, or you're the token one and that's why you're here, and simply, you're not welcome, you don't belong. And that is true, that is the messaging that we are getting. But what we also have to be careful of is how we then internalize that messaging and talk to ourselves. And as I mentioned before, this is something that has taken me a long time to process and to love all of those intersectionally marginalized parts of myself. And these are all of the things that we might be telling ourselves from the messages that we're getting, from what we see in our workplace. I can't win. I can't get ahead because there's no one like me in leadership. I won't be listened to. I won't be seen. This role, this space is not for me. It's not built for me. And then we might also think, well, I should just be grateful that I'm here. And, we know that often when we are one of the onlys, as is often the case, we're one of the only queer or melanated people in a space, or both, we know that people have their eyes on us. Even if they don't say it, we are aware that we are being perceived a lot of the time. And that can make it really difficult to ask for help. We can see that other people might just be able to do things, and they might have asked for help at some point, but we're not seeing that. So we don't feel like we can ask for help ourselves because it's taken so much just to get here, to be in this position. So anything that I put out about myself in this workspace, I want it to be positive. I don't want people to think that I'm quote unquote weak or I don't know something. I'm not safe and I'm fearful. Like, these are just, again, messages that can get really embedded, and thoughts that we tell ourselves. And also they might be true. You know, it's been really scary, I'm sure for a lot of you on this call, being in the UK at the moment, going out and about, when we are hearing within our communities, we're seeing it sometimes reported on the news, but not nearly as much as what's really happening, the amount of hate crime going on and the amount of debate, for example, about the existence of trans people, which should not be a debate at all, yet it continues. So sometimes we're not safe. And the result of this is that we can be stuck, we get stuck in that fear, in that sense of fear. We, as well as experiencing poor mental health, experience poor physical health because we're constantly in a stress response in our body, whether we know it or not. We are subconsciously, consuming all of this information that makes us feel like we're not safe or lets us know we're not safe. Even if we try and tell ourselves, I'm just in the office, it's okay. And that affects your immune system as well. And we can get poor health, physical health as a result of that as well. And then we can get low confidence because confidence is like a muscle. We need to be constantly working it in order to keep it. And we can feel really disempowered, especially with all of this that I've just mentioned, kind of scene setting here. Sorry, I keep sniffing. I've had a viral flu thing last week, so I'm really sorry about that. I don't have any tissues with me, so apologies for the sniffing. So yeah, I've got a picture here on this slide of young Asha. It's a picture of me, young me, about 12, 13 years old, looking off screen, off camera, wearing a black sleeveless top. I've got my lovely brown arms out. I've got a surfboard choker necklace on because it's the 90s. Actually, no, it's not. It's just the early 2000s. And a bucket hat that's white, but it's actually reversible. So there's a little bit of blue you can see underneath there. And I wanted to share this picture with you because this is the me that was showing up in the workplace a lot of the time. It's the young me that had gotten to high school and was treated very differently for the first time. I went to a practically all-white primary and secondary school. Me and my brother were one of the only two brown people or melanated people in the whole secondary school. And the difference between how I saw myself as just me and how people treated me became apparent very quickly, and I experienced bullying at the same time. I was really confused about my sexuality. It's when I heard the word bisexual for the first time and identified with that word and thought, there is a word for what I'm experiencing, that's me. But then couldn't talk to anyone about it. And, you know, there was, a lot of confusion going on. And this person, this unconfident young woman, is who I would bring, without even thinking about it, into workplaces. Unconfident, felt, wrong in so many ways, never quite got it right. And this is the person that was stuck in that place, had poor physical and mental health, was low in confidence and disempowered. So if no one has ever told you this, I just want to tell you now, it is okay to be you beautiful human. There's, as we mentioned, a lot of messaging that tells us it's not okay to be us and that we're not quite right, we're too much, we're wrong, we're up for debate. And if no one has ever told you this, I'm here to tell you it now. And I want you to tell this to yourself and reinforce the message that you are perfectly fine as you are. You're more than fine. You're amazing. And you're beautiful. Okay, so here's hopefully the bit that we will start building ourselves back up again. I'm going to sit a little taller now. The self-advocacy piece. Because as we've mentioned, there's a lot of barriers and negativity. People within the workplace sometimes are trying. So at the moment, a lot of people aren't trying with their diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives, or they're making cutbacks. And it can be really disheartening because we might be in that stuck place and we don't know how to get out of it. And the people that are employing us, or the people that should be leaders in our organisation, are not stepping up to the plate, and they're not doing what they should do to do their part to make sure that the workplace isn't just a replica of that horrible part of society that makes us feel not welcome, not enough, like we don't belong, and that we don't matter and we can't contribute because they don't fully see us and all that we can be. So we can obviously try and get them to provide training and workshops and improve their policies and their strategies going forwards. But ultimately, their actions and the actions of everyone in the organisation is not our responsibility. The thing we have responsibility for is ourselves and how we can show up for ourselves. And this is something that is really important because, again, we are often sent the message that we are not to take time for ourselves. Or sometimes we're giving the message about self-care, which is kind of the umbrella term for the kind of wellness industry, which again is overwhelmingly kind of cis, white, heteronormative. And self-advocacy, building yourself as an advocate for yourself, is, I think, a really true form of self-care, and it's something that can help you to thrive in these workplaces that are simply not built for us, or they're not changing quick enough to accommodate us. And I've broken it down into kind of 4 steps, because we always have to start somewhere, and we might have to practice on step 1 for a little bit, or build up those parts of step 1 before we can really get into steps 2 and 3. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time now on the following slides and hope that this gives you something tangible to take away from today. And again, if you wanted to go, as we're going along these slides, if there's any questions you have, you can go to menti.com, menti.com, and enter the code 18977099, and you can enter any questions that you have there. So these are the basic steps here. Number 1, acknowledging your dreams, which sometimes you might think of a dream and you might automatically have a thought that's like, well, I can't ever achieve that, or I've been trying in my career for so long and I'm nowhere near that dream. And, you know, just knowing that, knowing the dream, irrespective of any of the other thoughts and messaging that you're telling yourself, is really important, because there is a way that you can achieve your dream. We just might have to go about it a different way, or we might have to move workplaces sometimes, unfortunately. But again, we need to have that knowledge first and foremost. We need to learn self-acceptance about every part of ourselves that is intersectionally marginalized, because our experience might be very different to another person who may seem similar, but we all have different layers to our identity, and the more of those identity pieces that are part of the matrix, which is a system that marginalizes us, the more we might feel that we can't or shouldn't accept those parts of ourselves, because our experience has shown us it's not safe, or we don't think it's not safe. That's the crux of it, really. It's not safe to show those parts of ourselves, or to outwardly be proud of those parts of ourselves, because that means someone might react in a certain way and then we're not safe again. So yeah, I'll talk a bit more about step 1 in a minute, but also just acknowledging your support needs, and whether you experience mental health challenges or not, whether you're neurodivergent or not. Everybody has needs within the workplace, and sometimes just knowing and admitting to yourself, actually, I need a bit more support with this. I need this accommodation. Acknowledging that to yourself is really important. And again, we're living in a very ableist society that wants to tell us a lot of the time that we are lazy or we're stupid or we don't deserve help because of X, Y, Z, or just simply that help is not available to us because, you know, we do things this way and that's the way we've always done it. But we can learn to love those parts of ourselves and stand up for ourselves and say, actually, I do need this support. And as we will see on step 3, it's a legal requirement in the workplace for people to support us with those needs. So step 2, we're going to own our strengths and we're going to have self-compassion for anything we're working on. Step 3, as I mentioned, we will know what our rights are and we will have our own back and start then into step 4 to communicate those needs within the workplace context. We will be taking up the space that we deserve. And by doing so, we are empowering ourselves in a situation that looks to disempower us. And we're also signaling to anyone else who might be in the workplace, who might not be out as their gender identity or sexuality, it's okay to be you, and it's okay to ask for support. That's what we're signaling to them when we embody this self-advocacy. And just on the take-up space point, I just want to say, you know, again, all of this messaging can quite often mean that as melanated queer people, we want to shrink ourselves. We don't want to be too much. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. And that's wrong. Sometimes we need to, again, out of safety, but we deserve to take up the space that we were put on this earth to take up, whatever shape or form your body takes. I want you to take a little bit of a breath now, a deep breath, and sit up straight if you can in your chair. Maybe even raise your arms above you. Maybe even stand up and make yourself as big as possible. No one can see you. It's just me sitting here with my arms up in the air. And just feel what it's like to be big, to take up as much space as you can. And that's something as well that you can practice on a daily basis. It sounds very simple and like, how could that work? But even just standing for a couple of minutes, taking some deep breaths and standing with your hands on your hips, kind of in the power pose, or making yourself as big as possible, it sends really positive signals to your brain, to that subconscious. And it just reminds you that when you are taking up space, when you are rolling your shoulders back, this can be really helpful in the workplace as well. You're empowering yourself because, you know, you're not shrinking yourself. Okay, so let's move on to step 1 then. And a massive part of step 1 is finding your community. I've got a picture here of me. I am about 28 years old in this photo. I've got my black hair tied up behind me, some big kind of red feathery earrings dangling down, my red lipstick, a sparkly collar, and I'm wearing a pale jumper with some robins on. One of them's got Christmas antlers, and their robin red breasts are sparkly as well. And I've got 3 friends in this photo who I've covered their faces with red hearts because I didn't ask their permission to share this photo, and I know this is going to be on the internet for a long time. But these lovely people now make up part of my chosen family. And this photo is really important to share because it is the first time that I was in a queer space to like attend an evening in a queer space with my friends. And unfortunately, it's now closed down. But this night meant so much to me because on my journey, I've faced a lot of biphobia and bi-erasure. And when I did thought I was safe to come out when I was younger, I immediately got that thrown back at me, the bi-erasure and the biphobia, and then remained in the closet for a very long time. Was in a heteronormative facing relationship from the outside. So, you know, people just make assumptions, and having that experience of being intersectionally marginalized as a woman, as a brown woman as well, and suffering from mental health conditions at the time, it took a lot, and it also meant a lot to come out to these friends, two of whom I met through my workplace at the time, and to just be accepted, irrespective of my heteronormative looking relationship, irrespective of all of this messaging that I told myself from society and from people what have told me about my sexual identity, about being bisexual. And this night, I've also got a glass, I should have said that, I've got a little glass of white wine, you can just see it in the photo, and I'd had a few drinks, and the music was playing, a song came on that I absolutely loved. I started getting up and I was lip syncing to it, I suppose. No one else was. And do you know what I noticed? Nobody else in this massive room of amazing people was looking at me. They didn't care. I was literally standing up, gesticulating, taking up all the space and miming along to this song that I loved. And nobody cared. I don't know, I almost swore there. Nobody cared. And why is that important? Not only that I found my people that I could be myself with and also celebrate that in a queer space, but as a brown person in all my 28 years of life, this night showed me that basically my whole life, I suppose, since those later primary school years, early high school years, I've kind of been holding my breath in public spaces or even in family situations, because I'm dual heritage, so a lot of my family are white, or half, I should say. And I was holding my breath because I didn't really know if I was behaving in the right way, if it was okay to be me, especially in workplaces, especially in public places or events that I had to go to for work. I was subconsciously always looking out to and making sure I was acting in a way that was going to keep me as safe as possible, because I'd had these horrible experiences, because I'd heard these horrible things firsthand, or because I'd seen the constant messaging coming at me. And this was the first time in those 28 years at the time that I felt completely safe in a public place to just be myself, and that nobody was looking at me. And this might resonate with some of you. You might feel that in your current workplaces. And none of us can really be our true, silly selves that we are when we're completely alone or with those people that we trust the most. But the point of finding a community of people, however that looks like, as step one on your self-advocacy journey, is so that when you're in those situations, in those workplaces, or in the village pub, as I found myself in, where everybody's white in there, I will walk in with my white husband and people treat him differently to how they treat me, you can confidently say to yourself, that's okay. These are not my people. In this workplace, at this event, in this public space, these are not my people. But I know who my people are, and they love me for me, and they see me for me, and I know that I can be myself with them, and they want to be around me. And that's probably one of the biggest things that has consistently helped me in general, in society, in the world, because these microaggressions, as we've mentioned, they often tell us all of these things that we've said, that we're not welcome here, and we feel it when we walk into these spaces, and we are on high alert. But knowing that you have shared experiences with different people on different levels in terms of what you expose about your true identities to them, or your experiences you share, that can really help you when you're in those spaces. And at the end of the workday, when you've left, you could go potentially to an online space. You could mention a friend that is part of that community that really sees you and values you, and you can share with them. And you could, it could even just be sharing memes, for example, but you know that you're on the same page. There's that unspoken understanding between you that means you know inherently you're safe with them and it's okay to be yourself. So some of the places that you might want to look: following leaders online that you find inspiring, connecting with them, following them. This is what I've done a lot of myself. It's actually how I've met one of my closest friends. Actually, a lot of really good friends that I've made have been online. I've messaged them on LinkedIn. I've said, I've been following your work. I really enjoy this. Like, can we have a chat about X? And then from there, a friendship has developed. And again, there's lots of aspects to that. You might not find someone that completely mirrors all of your intersectionally marginalised identities, but you can find people that understand different parts of you and build from there. If you can find them, I haven't found too many safe, affirming online community spaces, which are both affirming for global majority people and also LGBTQIA+ people. Making those connections just one at a time, either in real life or online. You could go to events, groups, again, online or locally. And within your organisation, if there isn't an affinity group, or if you want to make a more intersectionally marginalised, affirming affinity group, something that, because what we often see is you might have like an LGBTQIA+ style of affinity group, and you might have an ethnicity or race affinity group, but you might not be able to completely say all the things you need to say or just be with either one of those groups, because there might be heterosexual people in who don't quite get it, or there might be the non-melanated people as well. And that's not to say that all of those people you wouldn't be safe with, or they wouldn't have an understanding, but sometimes you just need that space, as mentioned, where there's that unspoken understanding between you, especially for when you're having a really tough time. So that's one point, as like a base level. Find your people, find them any way that you can. And we know that at the moment, sometimes going out into these places publicly can be extra scary because of the rise in the racism and transphobia and Islamophobia that we've seen. So online is the way to go for that. So knowing your strengths and your needs, as mentioned briefly, we want to really know what are we good at, because often in these situations, our brain, when we perceive threats, either real threats to our sense of safety or psychological safety, or just our nervous system interpreting like an email from our boss as being threatening, which it has its right to do. Thank you, brain, for trying to keep us safe. Our brain can quite easily then go into threat perception mode. So we are more likely 15 times more likely to see threats all around us and actually ignore any positive things that are happening, or even positive things that we have done ourselves. We just have a propensity to over notice the negative things because our brain's just trying to keep us safe. So we want to know what we're really great at, and we want to tell ourselves as much as we can. We want to take notes from, if anyone gives you compliments within the workplace, you want to note that down somewhere where you can refer back to it and remind yourself that you're great of so many things. And of course, we're all human. We are not perfect. We might make mistakes. We might need help with things. So we want to be aware of, actually, what am I working on? What do I maybe need help with? And how can I accommodate my brain? Whether that's you have a neurodivergent brain, or you're suffering from a mental health condition, so again, your brain will work in a neurodivergent way, or you're simply in that threat response a lot of the time, and you realize that something isn't quite working within your day-to-day or within your workplace, and actually you need help with that. So these are all things that we want to know and be aware of. Me, myself, recently, I've had to come to terms with all of the things that I've struggled with for a lot of my life, and more so recently, being a neurodivergent burnout, that I just need to do my own work in a completely different way now. And it's been a lot of unlearning that internalized ableism to say, actually, no, I need this accommodation. My brain does not work that way, or I can try and force myself to do it that way, but it's going to expend so much energy that I'm not going to be able to get nearly as much done or anything done at all tomorrow if I do it in that way. So I'm not going to do it that way anymore. And that does take a lot sometimes to acknowledge to yourself. So knowing our rights is really important. The Equality Act 2010 is a law in the UK that should be protecting us all. But in practice, I think people adhere to the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, with a lot more fear than they do the Equality Act. And the Equality Act encompasses a lot of characteristics, but for the purpose of this discussion, race, as they call it, or ethnicity, sex and sexuality, and gender are all covered under this act. And that means, and again, you can go off and do extra research on this, but within workplaces, within public spaces, any public offering or any service that we come across, we should have equal access to all opportunities, and we shouldn't be discriminated upon based on any of the characteristics within the UK Equality Act, and these are covered within that. In reality, that might mean, for example, that within the workplace, there needs to be better trans inclusion, either within the environment itself or within the policies, or we need to do workshops to educate people and to get a culture change there. The same goes for sexuality and how people treat people outside the heteronormative lens within the workplace. It can mean that we need flexible working, for example, and that can be especially true at times where there's heightened hate crimes or we ourselves are struggling with our mental health. And if you're struggling with your mental health for longer than 2 weeks, you can go to your GP if you're able to get access, and you can try and pursue a diagnosis there for anxiety or depression. And if that is something that is then persistent, or it's persistent in your life, because as we've mentioned earlier on, at least half of us are experiencing anxiety and depression, and probably the reality is a lot more higher than the stats. If that's something that's a constant to you, and it would be apparent to your, what am I trying to say? If it's something that affects you for up to 12 months of the year, which often anxiety alone can do, then your workplace should make accommodations for you under the Equality Act. Okay, so basically the message I want to get across to you is, even if employers do not take this act seriously, you are perfectly within your right to remind them, educate yourself, or ask people to educate you, such as myself or Blossom LGBT, and go to your employer and say, actually, I'm not being supported, I don't have equal access to opportunities because this barrier is in the way for me, and nobody else is experiencing that barrier because they are not trans, or they are not non-binary, or they are not a lesbian couple seeking to adopt a child, for example. There's so many, all of these kind of barriers that we've been talking about, and the intersections and how it all kind of melds together. There can be so much that goes unseen, and sometimes to be honest, sometimes it just takes someone standing up and saying, actually, did you know that this is a barrier for me that other people do not have in this workplace? And oftentimes leaders will listen to that, whether you waive the kind of Equality Act or not. So that's something that's important for you to know and keep in mind. Oh, and I should say there's a picture on this slide of a group of melanated and non-melanated people, femme, masc, non-binary presenting people, people of different ethnicities wearing colourful clothes and makeup. So another message I want you to take with you: you can be the leader that you wish to see. Sometimes we need to just be the first. Sometimes there might even be a person you look up to in your organisation who has some of the identities or all of the identities that you yourself hold, but they're not there yet in their self-advocacy journey or even being an ally to other people. But that doesn't mean, even if you're not a senior person in your company or in your industry, that you can't act as the leader that you wish was there. So just know you have that power. And the final kind of thing I want to share with you is the empowerment piece. So once you've got your sense of community, you are able to work on knowing and loving yourself and the needs that you require or that you should have access to. Once you know how to go about asking that and what your rights are, especially within the workplace, and once you practice understanding practically how they might be resolved or how your needs might be met, you want to be able to communicate that. And this can be really tricky. Okay, so I've got an image here of a triangle that's pointing downwards. So the point of the triangle is at the bottom, a purple triangle, and in it, in white writing, says the drama triangle. And next to it, I have an arrow pointing down. And the position at the bottom of that triangle is the victim. So this is what we can easily fall into and what I have been in my head as the victim for a lot of my career. You feel oppressed, and you are oppressed by society, and you can feel completely helpless. And then you can have people, sometimes the white saviour comes in and this rescuer role that we see at the top of the triangle, and they try and save you without you asking for help even. And on the other hand, you might get the persecutor, so the other section at the top of the triangle. So they might be a person that just blames you or criticizes you or says, oh, you're always complaining about this. Oh, it's just because, you know, you're gay or you're a lesbian. Oh, you're talking about the trans agenda, or you're going on about being brown again, you know. Both of these positions, the persecutor and the rescuer, by people acting that way, naturally place you into the victim. They are taking the power away from you, and it can, and obviously society is wanting to put us there as well, because they always need someone, they need, quote unquote, the enemy, someone that can be blamed. I'm talking about within like mainstream media. And it can be really hard to reverse that triangle and get to the empowered state that we need to be in the workplace, especially when we've got the persecutor and the rescuer. And often we can also be in those positions ourselves. So what we want to try and aim for is practicing to be any place on the empowerment dynamic, which is the triangle I've got on the right-hand side here, a purple triangle with the arrow pointing upwards, the peak of the triangle pointing upwards, and an arrow also pointing upwards to show that the power is going upwards. And at the top of the triangle, we've got creator. So this is who we would hope to be. It's the person that says, I can do it. We know what choices we have. We know what potential solutions we have. And we advocate for ourselves, knowing that we're perfectly within our right and an amazing person, even though we're asking for these needs or options. And we can do it in a way that keeps us open to the conversation and how people might respond to that. We also might, at the bottom there, you see the persecutor can change into the challenger. So that's the person that then encourages the creator. So they say things like, you can do it. I know you can. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the role of the coach. So someone that's supporting. So instead of coming in as the rescuer and doing it for you, they're supporting you to do it yourself. And they ask questions like, how will you do it? And again, you can be this different person for yourself. So often I can find myself getting stuck in the victim mentality, and I can say, you know, all of these things in my head, like, I can't do this, it's just really hard, I've never done this before. And then I think, oh, thought errors, and I can try and switch into the coach, and I will say to myself, okay, you have not done this before, but you've done other hard things before. You don't know how to get there yet, but I know you can get there. So how will you do it? How will you get there? And I ask myself those questions, and I'm allowing myself to seek out support in order to get to those places. So hopefully that was just a little bit of a whistle-stop tour on the empowerment dynamic then. But if you've got any questions, please let me know. I'm going to check if there's been any questions coming through so far on the Mentimeter. We've got a QR code up on screen as well. If you would prefer just to scan the QR code on the left there, will take you through to the same page so that you can ask questions about anything that you've heard or seen today. If you want any further explanation on anything, or if it's just brought up any other questions for you, I would love to hear from you. So again, you can go to menti.com as well, menti.com, and it will ask you to enter a code. If you enter the code 18977099, it will take you through to the screen where you can input your question. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to filter those questions through. And also I've got a QR code here to my LinkedIn, where I would love you to connect with me and follow and engage with my content. And there's a picture of my dog Jumble here at the bottom of the screen, with his signature white tooth hanging out. He's a little black pug with a greying beard, and he's wearing a blue and white jumper. And yes, he features heavily on my LinkedIn feed. So if you like dogs, that's one reason, if nothing at all, to give me a follow. And I would, again, welcome any DMs and love to hear from you. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Asha Harkness. You can find Indigo_inclusion on Instagram, and also Indigo Inclusion on LinkedIn. We've got our own page. So I've got some questions coming through. Comments from the socials. Thank you, Steph, for feeding those through. So 1, my mental health impacts my physical health. And 2, I am learning this from you about internalized ableism. Okay, that's good. That's amazing. The more we know, the more as we've been talking about, the more we are personally empowered to make a change. We don't have to accept that these things are just a given. And 3, my 18-month stands in power pose. My 18-month stands in power pose better than me. So I think that's someone referring to an 18-month-year-old that stands in the power pose. That's amazing. Sometimes you have to learn. I mean, children are just inhibition free at that age, aren't they? They haven't learned all of these horrible societal messages yet. So they're always great inspiration to learn from. Okay, so I've got a few questions that have come through. Oh, I've just refreshed it, sorry. Let's have a look. So the question I've got is, how do I practically regain my power and get out of the victim mentality? Okay, this is a really good and important question. So let me just think about this for a second and break it down. So I would say the first steps are any thoughts that you're having about being in that victim space, write them down. And this can sometimes feel very hard, but just on a notes app on your phone, you can delete it afterwards, or on a piece of paper, or, you know, even voice noting it, excuse me, voice noting it to a loved one or a trusted person. All of the things that you think are working against you, that are all of the thoughts that are putting you in that victim mindset. Because we just want to acknowledge them out loud, first of all. And then we want to look at them, look at these thoughts and say, actually, is this true? And it might be true that in society, as an extremely intersectionally marginalized person, you are facing all of these different barriers. But you might have a thought error that comes up there that's like, well, I just can't get out of this space. I can never win, for example, which is what I was in. And it will take a lot, and it will take hard work and practice to get you out of that. But acknowledging those thoughts first off is a really important step. And then what we want to do is be that coach for ourselves, or find people that can also help and challenge us in a really positive way, and just break it down one thing at a time. Any thoughts that have come out of that thought download that you find yourself in this position that you think you just can't get out from, find those solutions, ask people for help. And while you're doing that, just, you know, work on one thing at a time. Don't try and change everything at once, but by doing one thing at a time, because we can't separate our intersectionally marginalized identities, it invariably will help in other areas of your life as well. So just try one thing at first. Try and make sure you have the people that can build you up when you're feeling like that, and that won't also jump in and join into that narrative of being in the victim mindset. And make sure that you are growing your own internal confidence and seeing yourself as creator, seeing yourself as the person that can do things. And this is something I've had to do for myself. I do a weekly wins with, I'm actually part of a little group on WhatsApp that's for melanated people, and a lot of them actually queer as well. Hello, if you're watching. And we do a thing where every Friday we share our wins, and that can be something really small. One of mine this week is going to be, I asked someone for help. And me as a founder, as a business owner, that might sound really small, but I want to tell myself, I am proud of you for asking for help, because that's not something that I usually do. I find it very difficult to do because of the way that I've been socialized, and because of the way I try to keep myself safe and try to keep myself like, you know, oh, thank you. So I've seen that some thank yous are coming through on the socials. I hope that answers the question, but yeah, reinforce the positive. Keep your confidence growing by seeing what small wins you've made each week and evidence that you can do things. So even if it's hard, find the evidence for other hard things you've done in the past and find those solutions, and just take it one step at a time. And I think we're almost at time now. So if it's okay, Maykay, I'll hand it back over to you and just say, yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, Asha. And to all of you who has really shown up today to learn more about how we can thrive as LGBTQIA+. The acronym is is so long, and of course many more. Just thank you so much for everything that you chose to share, because it's been really insightful, and it's pretty evident based on all of the comments that have come through so far. And my personal favorite was actually, of course, the good old power pose, but especially the contrast between the two triangles for the drama triangle versus the empowerment dynamic. So that was really, really cool. So as we bring this webinar to a close, let's just really carry forward what we've all learned tonight. Like each and every one of us who's tuning in right now, whether you're here live or here, watching this as a replay, there's one thing that you can take away. Right. So I just want to give you a heartfelt thank you, Asha, for guiding us with your wisdom, your experience, compassion, and really being open to sharing your personal stories along the way as well. That was really wonderful. So before we conclude, I just want to remind everyone here that your journey doesn't have to stop here. Right. So feel free to reach out with any questions. Your feedback is essential to us. So please just take a moment to share your thoughts and suggestions as well. And if you found this webinar helpful and you'd like to keep up to date with all the other things that we have coming up at Blossom, be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Eventbrite. So you can also sign up to our mailing list from our website too. And I also finally would like to highlight our mentorship scheme for LGBT plus youth, right? So we provide support to help you develop yourself personally and professionally. So whether you're interested in being a mentor or a mentee, reach out to us for more information, because we would love to hear from you. So altogether, let's just support each other throughout this journey for safety, self-advocacy, and empowerment in the workplace and beyond as LGBTQIA+ folks of color. So until next time, everyone, thank you so much again, Asha, and take care. Bye for now.